This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love to work alone. Hey there, everybody. Franklin Taggart here, and this is Your Own Best Company. And I am delighted to welcome back my two good friends, Holthausen and Audrey Holst. And in the midst of it, my stupid phone starts to buzz, and I'm not even going to edit that out.
I couldn't hear it, so it's all good.
Excellent. Okay. I was just distracted, and it's like, if they wonder why I looked over to the side, that's why I did. So we're here to talk. This is another round table, round robin, round whatever. And we've been tossing back the idea of talking about this thing called deep work. Now, I think that the initial inspiration for our discussing this was that Audrey found an article that got us all thinking and talking. Mm-hmm. And Audrey, do you want to open things up with that?
Yeah. So there was an article that came out. I need to pull it back up from my thing here. Oh man.
We'll make sure to have a link in the description for people.
Yeah, I was going to say, so this article was basically saying, to sum it all up, that this concept that we call quiet quitting or job dissatisfaction, or, you know, what the article was trying to say was that people are not trying to disengage and just like slack or just, you know, phone it in on their jobs, that they actually want to be engaged. And a lot of these things that are being identified are coping mechanisms, essentially, right? Quiet quitting is a coping mechanism for people who don't have control of their own time. That was one of the main things. They don't have control over their own time. And they did a survey of over, I think, 700 professionals. And the majority of them were basically saying, like, they want to, like, the major thing that was contributing to their burnout was their lack of time to work on the things that they want to work on. And they were basically saying, what would improve for us is if we had more of that time to work on the stuff that we want to do. So that was a very interesting perspective. And yeah, unfortunately, it's later in the day on a Friday here, and my brain, I literally just looked at the article before this call, and it's out of my brain what it's actually the name of the article and the writer. So we'll make sure we get that in the description.
There will be a link to it, but I think that you captured the gist of it beautifully. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really leapt out at me about it was that a big frustration. And one of the things that they're talking about as being quiet quitting is actually people's desire just to do their job.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
It's like they don't want to be distracted from the work that they've actually been hired to do.
Yes.
And so they're overcoming a frustration that's pretty legitimate there. Mm-hmm. Erica, what was your take on it when you initially read the article?
You know, a big part for me was a couple of things. Just thinking back to jobs that I've had where that was a shared frustration. I used to work for a company, and the rule was that you had to respond to any email that came in within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
gosh.
a writer. Like, do you want me to create something of quality, or do you want me to constantly be putting out fires? But that was sort of the thing at this company. And I always felt like I was in reaction mode instead of proactive, you know, doing anything proactive. It really, like, I hated that feeling, because how to feel like you're behind 100% of the time, that'll do it. And then what really struck me as I was thinking about the article, kind of after I finished reading it, is how so many of those things and that inability to control your own time, I took with me into my own damn business.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are you doing? And it really, one of the things that I have written down on my board for when I get into real planning for 2023 is take full control of the calendar. Like, I know when I work best. I know when I need time. I and not just put it in the calendar, but the practice for me is then honoring what I have in the calendar, because far too often I'll set time aside for something that is important for me to get done, to work on my business. And if somebody's like, oh, do you happen to have time available on such and such? I'm like, okay, like, stop. Like, I am my own worst boss right now. And it's like, okay, that's something you want to do. Make that the priority and make sure that you've carved out the time. And I've done well with some of it, but then some of it I've really not done well with. So
what are some of the checks that you're putting in for yourself to as criteria?
My morning is my deep work time.
Okay.
Like an hour and a half of zero interruptions. And my brain works best first thing in the morning, and I'm an early riser. So it's sort of like, come in first thing in the morning. That's when I do the stuff that is working on my business or editing work that's going to take a little bit more brain power. So putting in an hour and a half for deep work, which for the most part I've done pretty well with most of this year.
Yeah.
But then it's also like build in time for when you're doing LinkedIn, so you don't just mindlessly scroll. I'm in the process of, again, unsubscribing to a whole bunch of email newsletters because it is too bloody much.
Yeah.
And I come across things, and if depending on where I am, if I'm in a place where I'm feeling, uncertain or a little vulnerable about my business, I'll like download 10,000 more like free ebooks and this and that and the other thing. And then I'm on 10,000 more bloody newsletters. And so part of it is also take the time and building in time off for myself, because when I trust myself, I don't do that. I don't try to like gain all this other, like somebody has the magic answer. They don't.
Audrey does. I'm pretty sure Audrey does.
Yeah. It's one of those, there are always people who can help you get to where you want to go. But the desperate search for answers, when I get into that mode, I know it's because I need a little break. I need to just like go kind of literally go hug a tree, and then I can feel better. And then it's like, okay, what do I actually need? And sometimes it's calling a friend. Sometimes it's working with a coach to say, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Because that can so help with both accountability and bumping me out of what I call spin cycle, where I just get stuck in my little head. Like a good coach can just be like, boop, there you go. And you're like, oh, thanks. I'm good now, So.
Yeah. What about you, Franklin?
Well, I've taken a lesson from you, Audrey, and that is that I love your automated email response that says, you've sent me an email. Here's what to expect now.
So good.
I think that's brilliant. First of all, because it's communicating with the person, it's helping them to have an expectation that is more in line with your reality than their expectations that they carry over from whatever they think should happen.
Yeah.
But one of the other things that I've really, and I still struggle with it, I have to be honest with you. When I switched over to the automatic scheduling system and using Calendly, there were some things built into that I really liked. And one of them is that I could send people different calendars. And so I have 3 calendars to work with. And one of them is for people who want free stuff. One of them is for people who want to pay me. And one of them is for my own production and my own, creativity needs. Oh. And I've stuck with those pretty well. But one of the things that I've started to do is to book time on my own Calendly for me.
Oh.
And that has been something that has been really helpful, because it's like,
I kind of love that. It's not just blocking time off, it's actually booking.
Yes.
There's a subtle but really Oh, that's fascinating. I
That's
love that idea.
Brilliant. Like my brain just glitched a little bit. I'm like, that is when you said you had a calendar for your own work, like in your Calendly, my brain was like, what? Tell me more about that.
So it's a really interesting thing. And I think the trickiest thing was disciplining myself to use it. Because it's really easy to just get on Google Calendar and just start punching like poking here and poking there, and it's like ending up with all the colors on the screen, and it's like, oh, isn't that exciting? I'm so busy. But really,
just feeling personally attacked over here, Franklin. Thank you very much for that.
Oh my gosh, it's been the story of my life for years. It's like my Google Calendar is like this big rainbow throw up thing. It's just gross. But this whole idea of booking time with myself actually helps me to come into the deal with more intention, and a little bit more of a higher expectation for how I'm going to use the time. And like I said, it's taken some discipline to get in the habit of using it, but I've seen it work already, and it's been a helpful thing.
How much time do you book with yourself? Like, what is your time limit on your? I'm just curious.
I have 2 full days a week that are available for that. And I make my time a priority on those days. And I only allow other people to have them if all of the other days are full.
Yeah. I think that's the other interesting thing too, is sort of controlling how many conversations we have with other people. They're fuel for our business. They're, the great conversations are also fuel for like our spirits. But if I have too many in one day, it doesn't matter if I have an amazing conversation. I'm just exhausted and depleted, and figuring out what that sort of magic number is something I'm still kind of playing with. And I have this guilt thing associated with like making them wait too long. And it's like, oh, honey, like if it's a get to know you call, like nobody is upset if they can't have that call tomorrow. Like, especially if it ends up being a great call, it's just like, okay, now you're in my orbit. If we're talking, once a month, whatever, it works. But I have this like anxiety about making sure that, but they want to connect, so you have to jump on it immediately. No, you don't. Like you really, really don't.
Yeah. Well, in one of our earlier conversations, I talked a little bit about my goal this year of switching the ratio from more production or more consumption to more production.
Yeah.
And that step has been a part of that process for me. What it looked like at the beginning of the year was that I designated Wednesday and Thursday as production days. Those are the days that, like on Thursday, I'm going to produce the podcast for Friday. And on Wednesday, I'm going to do like online courses and whatever other creative projects that I'm working on. That worked to a point, but I found that it was still easy to give that time away. Where if I do it through Calendly, I actually have to go back and reschedule. There's a prompt that says reschedule this appointment. So it's like it's harder to cancel and it's harder to give that time away once it's on Calendly. It's still on the same calendar. It's like it's still a pretty throw up color on my Google Calendar, but it's there's something about it energetically that is giving me a little bit more structure around what I do.
Yeah, I love that.
Have either of you read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport?
It changed the way I run my business.
Oh my God. Cal used to be a neighbor of mine when we lived in DC. He's
no kidding.
It's so funny.
Professor of Georgetown. I don't know him well. I would love to know him a lot better.
Does he seem as nice as he seems in his books?
Like I said, I don't know him well enough to say, but just in terms of his reputation in the community, he was
throwing ragers or anything like on the weekends where you were like, oh man, this guy.
I have a total Cal Newport crush. So like,
well, the other book that he wrote that really had a strong impact on me was So Good They Can't Ignore You. And both of those books have come up for me in recent conversations. Yesterday, at one of our familiar mixers where we've both hung out. One of the discussions was on remarkability. And I think that Cal's ideas about, really doing the work and allowing yourself the time and the space to go as deep as you can, that is the thing that's going to end up being remarkable. But if you go around saying, I'm trying to be remarkable, well, good on you.
Digital minimalism is the only book of his that I've read at this point, I think, which
it's
is, I think, right. It follows along the same philosophies. And I think just like what you said, Franklin, I will reference a previous podcast that folks can go back and listen to where we talked about thought leadership. And I think that's the same concept as if you're chasing a goal in the way that like, I am going to become remarkable, just like I am a thought leader, you're missing the point. The point, right? The point is the process, which is basically what we're talking about, that deep work piece, right? Like you can chase the goal, but if you don't actually have the process in place to be producing what you want to produce, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. And, remarkable thought leader on your business card really doesn't say much about anything.
Well, it tells us.
Well, I guess I should change my business card then, shouldn't I? Audrey Holst, remarkable thought leader. Shoot.
Reprint.
But what's interesting too is that it's the days that I really do get to dive in and do deep work, that's when I feel most remarkable. That's when I feel like, there's something here. I find it's energizing, it's exciting, it's you start to see, okay, how does this all fit together, and how is this going to help people, and how is it going to lead to change, and how is this, and suddenly like the pieces start to fall into place that you may have known all along, but all of a sudden everything just like lines up and you're like, look at that.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
I have some curiosity around the concept of sacrifice and whether this comes in around this topic, because it occurs to me that in order to make the room for deep work, that there is maybe something else that might have to be sacrificed or substituted or some version of that. And based on your experience this year, Franklin, I'm curious if that is something that comes into play.
Absolutely.
Doing more deep work. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that that's something that people, it's like they want to do more deep work, but like they don't want to change anything else somehow. Some version
There are two things that I can tell you. I am no longer as visible, and I am no longer as available as I once was.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the two things that I had to put on the chopping block and say, you know what, visibility really doesn't matter if I'm not doing the work, and neither does availability for that matter. So it's like the ability to just shut things off and to lock myself away has meant that I am not in as many places and as available to as many people as I once was. And that is actually, for me, it's been a learning experience, because I've always kind of been, kind of a habitually present person in like public networking and things like that. And I think COVID gave me a great excuse to not do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I realized through all of that isolation and quarantine was that I was actually getting more done. Mm-hmm. And I liked it. Like Erica was talking about, it's like that feeling of accomplishment and that satisfaction that comes with really seeing these things that I've envisioned and intuited come into being. That's now, if I had to give that up to be more visible and available, I would tell you to go do something to yourself.
But this is such a fascinating conversation, because I haven't gotten quite to that point, Franklin, but it's the point I want to be at, because
you can see it from there.
I sacrifice my deep work. I sacrifice my time to think and dive in and really get clarity and really do the stuff that I love, that I know will pay off in the long run, that I know will be really useful in the long run, because I feel like I should all over myself. I have all of the shoulds. Like, you should do this, you should do that. You have, like, and that's coming from somebody who is on one social media platform.
Yeah.
So, and there's still all of that pressure to do all of the things, to be all of the places. So finding the balance, that's the trick. And I don't know yet what that balance is. I know I want more of the deep work, and I want to stop sacrificing the deep work. But then I get into my head about, like, oh, but if you're not having at least this many calls with new people and constantly growing your network, and it's like, oh my God, like, your head just wants to explode.
There are two things that come up as you say that. And one of them is, I just thought of another chopping block item that I had. And that was the belief that social media was doing anything for me. Because I had to come to the realization, and I really had to look at it starkly. What is happening as a result of my involvement on social media, as far as opportunities are concerned, and as far as, good client relationships being formed? And I had to be honest with myself that it was very little. And I just was spending so much time there, even on only a couple of channels. I wasn't involved on all of them, but on those 2 channels, I was there all the time. And it was like, this has no return. And I can't even say that I'm investing here, because the time that I'm spent there is mostly passive. It's not active. It's scrolling and looking and starting to just feel overwhelmed and hypnotized by the whole thing. Yeah. So that was another chopping block item, was, the time that I spend on social media just has to be minimalized, and it has to be very intentional. And I'm still not that great at it, I have to say. But that was one of the things that had to go. Now, the second thing that you were talking about is that what's really funny for me is that I didn't have the experience of deep work before that I would even understand that sacrifice. I didn't have a frame for that in my experience.
Yeah.
Until I had read Cal's book, and it had really rocked me. And I started to figure out, what can I do about this? Because, time blocking I've tried before, and I didn't have the, I think part of it was that I was just so damn codependent that I didn't have any boundaries around it.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to carve out time. And one of the things that I found is that I have to have a room with a door. In order for it to get done, I have to have a room with a door. And that is the thing that was really, when I started to actually allow myself closed door time, all of a sudden, I started to experience what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And now that is too valuable to give up.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I think so. I think there's a couple of things that are worth noting. Is sometimes the things that are sacrificed are not actually things that are contributing positively to begin with, right? There are things
not very valuable.
Yeah, they're not
really a sacrifice, but they feel like it.
Right. It may feel like, by taking this action, right, I am leaving money on the table, I'm leaving social media or whatever. But I think that that's where the being honest with your numbers, or being honest with, hey, in business, like, where are my clients coming from? Where am I actually getting my business from? Where am I making my most, right? Where's most of my money coming from? Is it actually something that I can directly tie back to social media and say, like, actually, yeah, when I post here, and here, like, I can see that direct impact? Or is there something else is happening here? I think that having that, it sounds like that's basically what you did. And you're like, yeah, no, this is not, there's nothing here. There's nothing here for me. That doesn't need to be. I think the other thing that occurs to me is that there are, I kind of have to think about things in cycles, and I don't think about them in neat cycles at this point in my business, because my business is still young enough that I can't say like for sure, like when I do this happens, when I do this happens, right? I'm still kind of figuring those things out.
Yeah.
And there are some seasons, I think, where I do feel like, okay, I do need to be bringing a little bit more people into, like, I do need to actually have a few more conversations and trying to figure out, okay, I'm having more conversations. That is going to take away from, possible client time or possible work time. And so maybe knowing that if I'm in a networking season, it is going to take away from the other things. But on the other side, right, if I decide, okay, like I've had a billion conversations with these people. And right now I'm at the point where I will have conversations with people that I am introduced to through somebody else that knows me pretty well. Yeah. So, but that's taken me a while to get to that point, because in the beginning it was just like, you just network with whoever. And now I'm a little bit more discerning with who I will network with, because I'm like, okay, this person knows me. They know my work. They're making this introduction. This is a valuable use of my time. So I feel like that takes a while to get there. And I definitely, the networking piece has been tough for me, Erica, too. I agree with you there. And then, yeah, having those pieces, those time periods of putting your head down, doing the client work or working on the business or whatever, it's not when I think about the word balance, I think about I think about the concept of like balancing on one leg, and it's not a static thing. There are little adjustments that are happening constantly in order for you to be able to stand on one leg. And I think that that's basically what is happening in the business world too, is like, there are little adjustments that we're making adjustments to our calendars on a regular basis. Like yesterday I was looking at my calendar and I was like, oh God, why did you do this to yourself? Right? Why did you do this to yourself? And then, because of the magic of a scheduler, Franklin, I had somebody at the last minute reschedule their call, and it went right off my calendar. And I was like, because people are busy. To your point, Erica, people are busy. And if people are busy in their businesses, they're not going to be able to talk for another month or two anyway, right? Everybody I'm talking to right now, we're scheduling out for December and January, maybe. Oh, yeah. So that's kind of the reality. I think in the beginning of business, we're like, you feel like, oh my gosh, I gotta have this conversation now. But once you get into it, you're like, hold up. Hold up.
Yeah.
November's done. We're done. November is closed. There's nothing else in November. You're going to maybe try to get a week or two in December before the holidays hit. And then we'll talk about the new year. So that, depending when people are listening to this, this podcast episode, but those are a couple of thoughts I was having. And it is a very, it takes a lot of, I think it takes experience. I think it takes being in your business long enough that you're like, you feel confident enough that you can do this. Yeah. It takes being around the right people, that people are like, yeah, totally. That's cool. You can do that. You're allowed, Yeah. And it takes, for me, it takes a certain commitment to slow growth, or the ability to deal with slow growth. Because if you want fast growth, you are probably going to be taking different action steps than people who are willing and able and want to take the fast or take the slow, sustainable business growth path.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's like one of several things hit me as you were talking, Audrey. And one was like, everybody listening to this, find yourself some business owner friends.
Yes.
Because
amen,
having like this kind of a community where we can come together and have honest conversations about what we're struggling with, or an experience that we had, or how do you do this, or like your friends and family who are not in this world, they may be lovely, but they don't get it because they can't get it because it is not their framework. So having other people in this world that can support you, that are in the same thing with you, that can make those amazing introductions for you, to connect you with people that it's like, oh, here's a connection that's actually definitely going to be valuable. It is huge. And then, you were talking about balance, Audrey, and the idea of, that standing on one leg. I have always struggled with the term and idea of balance, because it's like walking a knife's edge. And I am not hardwired that way. I tend to be rather extreme. I am either all in or I am all out. And I've gotten more comfortable, more comfortable until I'm not, which means like if here's the line, sense. I'll be like way the heck over here. And then I'm like, oh girl, like rein it in. And like, you have to come back the other way. But
that makes sense.
I've gotten more comfortable with the zigzag over the line. And, it was just the other week that I like I zigged way too far over here, which is where I currently am, and looked at my calendar and blocked off, like just put in a big block for the entire week of Thanksgiving, which will get me back over here so that I can kind of average out around here. Now, I'd like these to be like maybe not quite so extreme. Like maybe we can get them this way. That would be kind of cool. But, I think that's another thing is I think there are some people who can do who are baller at the beam and they can walk that beam without a problem. And that's their jam. But if you're not one of those people, it's okay, because neither am I.
But the thing that I was really struck by in Audrey's analogy is that we're not designed to do that 24/7, 365. And I loved what you said about the cyclical nature of things, Audrey. And I keep coming back to that for myself. It's like there are times when it's time to go ahead and plant. The thing that came to my mind as you were talking was my wife works with flower essences, and there's a flower essence company called Paralandra, and the woman who started that had the idea of the soilless garden. And the soilless garden is anything that you're working on that's just something that you're growing, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about that concept is the whole idea of that you're not growing things all year round. It's like there are times when you've got to just, let the dirt rest and recuperate. And then you've got there are times when you've got to plant seeds, but they're not quite ready to go into the soil yet. And so they have to be tended. And then there's the time when you can put them in the soil and then the tending looks different. And then, you start to get excited when you start to see blossoms and buds. And then all of a sudden there's a harvest, and the harvest lasts, about a month. And then you're back to the whole idea of clearing it out again and starting over. And I really feel like that there's something to that and the work that we're doing and I've noticed that myself as one of the beauties of having only one job now is I can actually observe things. When I was trying to do 5 different things, I didn't have the bandwidth for that kind of self, observation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've been struck by, since really letting music take a back seat, is the cycles of the coaching work. And there's some predictability around them. It's like I can look at my calendar for the last 3 or 4 years, and I can see, during that particular time, I was booked solid for 3 months. What happened before that?
Yes.
I was doing a lot of networking. I was doing a lot of cultivating. And then what was happening before that? Well, I was doing a lot of inner work, reflecting and stuff like that. And to be able to go back and see the cyclical nature of it.
I like cyclical.
I like cyclical too.
My grandmother would freak out on that one. But she's dead, so it's all good. But in any case, I love the fact that you pointed to that, because I really feel like that there is something to that when we talk about deep work as well, in that I don't know that we're designed to be in deep work all the time, year round.
No.
It's something that we
also
need to...
not all the time, not for an extended period.
Yeah.
Because we've all had those things where it's like by the end of the day, I am a useless human and I am doing things that are like, that requires zero brain power because I have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
And, a lot of, you have to build that muscle to do focused deep work. When I first started carving out my hour and a half, my 90-minute block, like I found myself having a really hard time and like wanting to like get up and walk around and just putter and it was like, ooh, like this is interesting. I have to get reacquainted with staying focused for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a combination of that. And then Audrey, so much of the work you do with recognizing when your body is telling you, like, some days, like as rigid as I kind of like to be, because if the world worked the way I wanted it to, like, yeah, everything would be calendared and it would all run perfectly. And that's just not going to happen. But listening to my body and learning when it's like, okay, today you are not going to get in an hour and a half of deep work because you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Or knowing like, okay, you've gotten way too far in this direction and you've overbooked yourself. You need to self-correct. And if you listen to your body, it gives you the clues. I only know this, y'all, because like Audrey, I on my screen, I'm pointing to Audrey.
See, on my
So
screen,
maybe
I'm
she's
there.
someplace else. But anyway,
Audrey's in the Alice position on the Brady Bunch.
But I love it. So the thing that occurs to me in all of this too is just the concept of like a business and entrepreneurship and like solopreneurship and the different like levels of humanness that is involved in, depending on the size of your business, depending on how many humans are contributing to your business, right? You may have multiple humans that are contributing to your business, or you may be a, business of one, right? And, we are not robots. And even if you repeated the same routine every single day, you ate the same thing, you went to bed at the same time, it would not produce the same exact predictable result day to day, because we are impacted by the things around us. We are impacted by seasons, right? It's just like Franklin was talking about, planting seeds. It's like, if you're trying to plant a crop, it's going to go differently if you're in the middle of a drought or if you're in the middle of a monsoon, right? Like, you're not like, okay, well, it was on my calendar to plant seeds today, but there's a hurricane happening. So, right. It's like, you're not going to go outside in the hurricane and plant your seeds. Like, that's just, it's like stupid, but we don't really use that same sort of discernment for ourselves sometimes. I think we have talked about this, I think, in some past episodes too, of like what happens when things are going sideways. How do you keep, your business going when you are having a very human experience? And I think that, just keeping these things in mind, right? Like, it's almost like building enough mental and just even scheduling space to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room for when things are going to inevitably go sideways, or something happens, or the car has issues, or right, like all of this sort of stuff, right?
You just went in my head, and you went in my mind right there, because I was just thinking about my Monday this week. Was one of those days that I had 2 full 90-minute blocks that I had scheduled for creative work, right? Well, the car had to go to the shop, and then my wife was in Florida and had to come home a day early due to the hurricane that was anticipated.
Literal hurricanes.
Literal.
Yeah. So it was really
metaphorical hurricane and literal hurricane.
Both of those things came true for me, Audrey. I don't know, but you just described what I was going through earlier in the week. But it was one of those things where it's like the time that I had scheduled, those blocks of time that I had put aside, there were other more pressing issues that came along, and I had to let go of what I had intended in order to respond,
Yeah.
But I have a question for both of you, and that is like, let's talk a little bit more practically. What does deep work really look like for you? Like, give me some examples of deep work in your life.
You should start that one, Erica, because I feel like you've got a real solid handle on it.
So the night before, I plan the next morning.
What does the planning look like?
It is the back of paper and a pen, and what is the one thing, it's basically what is the top priority, what is the thing that you are working on right now. So, and it's blocking off the time to do that thing. So for me right now, one of the things that I really want to do in 2023, and I've been noodling and thinking about, and just like for a while it had to be in a parking lot because I had other stuff that really needed to happen. And then it was like, okay, now I can finally take it out of the parking lot, is doing more public speaking. It's something that I have always enjoyed, but never been intentional about. So I'm trying to get more intentional. So as a part of that, one of the things that I've been doing is creating a talk that is specifically about this idea of a body of work.
Oh, yeah.
And I've gotten like way nerdy about it, and it is so much fun. And like Dr. Suzanne Simard, who wrote Finding the Mother Trees, is in there, and it's just like, so I'm totally nerding out. So that has been a big part of, okay, for example, earlier this week, it was, I knew I had sort of a concept, but I wasn't really sure what the heck I was talking about, but I knew I had read it in Dr. Suzanne Simard's book. So it was like, okay, you're going to spend a half hour actually finding the research that you remember reading that you can't remember what the heck it said. So there was part of that. There was, I have been practicing a short version of my talk with my Toastmasters club. So I gave that talk on Wednesday and got a whole bunch of feedback. And it's like, oh, here are some things. And then when you're really thinking about stuff, it was driving to my Toastmasters meeting that some completely other idea that I was like, oh, I finally get it, like hit me while I'm in the car, of course. So then it's like talking to your phone. So then it was like, wait a minute, I made a note on my phone, capture that and put it together and then noodle it. So that idea, because it's fresh and newly formed and hasn't really, like, it hasn't become a thing yet. It's just sort of like a blob.
Yeah.
I did a free writing exercise on that this morning. So that's sort of how, depending on what the project is, that's kind of how I structure my 90 minutes and kind of figure that out. And then it's after my 90 minutes is over, that's when I usually go make myself some breakfast. And, it's sort of the pre-start to the day. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's my favorite part of the day.
Wonderful. I love the sound of it.
Yeah. I am new. So for context, I would say it's probably been about a month ago now. I went away for 2 weeks, and while I was gone, I was in a tent. I had removed all of the apps off of my phone. My inbox was paused. So literally I couldn't see anything. Nothing was coming in. I had no cell phone service for a lot of it because we were camping in the national parks. So I had a really hard reset on a lot of things. Also, we didn't build any campfires. So when it was dark, we went to bed. And we wanted to hit the trails. Yeah, when we wanted to hit the trails before everybody else, we started having this kind of cadence of getting up around 5 a.m. and going to bed around 9 p.m. And I really liked that. And I've been a night owl my entire life. And I've always wanted to be the early riser, but it never really, but that cadence kind of stayed with me. So I'm still in that cadence in some capacity. And so now my deep work is sort of shifting to the mornings, where that's not where it was before. Not really.
Yeah.
And writing comes best. I want to, depending on the type of writing. If I need to like put my head down and write, morning is best for me.
Yeah.
And something occurs to me just around this concept of like, I'm not available at this time, right? Like, right. This, like, I am not available during this time. This is me time. There is a certain, so this goes along with what you said earlier, Franklin, around like outputting as opposed to a lot of consuming.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed for myself was that when I was consuming less information, I can hear my own opinions and my own preferences more clearly.
Yeah, I love that.
So I'm like making decisions a little bit faster. I'm delaying things a little bit less than I usually do because I'm one of those people that will put off. Which, whatever. But sometimes it is a bit of an energy suck. So that I'm trying to like stay a little bit in this cadence of like not consuming, because that's the other thing too, is consumption starts to I'm one of those people that consumption will get into my head. And especially because I'm around a lot of business owners, a lot of the stuff I'll end up consuming is business related. And then I start to get into oh, shoot, this person's doing really well. Oh, shoot, maybe I should think about this for my business. Oh, shoot. Instead of just putting my head down, doing what I know works and like sticking to my plan, I get really distracted. So that's my answer to that question. I'm a baby deep worker at this point.
But there's a lot of gold in there.
Yeah, that is such a great observation, Audrey, because like similar to you, I have realized, and I have to learn it and relearn it and learn it again and learn it another time because I am very thick-headed. I
would not, first of all, I'm going to say no to that statement, but go on, Erica.
I won't support you.
I don't support that statement.
Okay, well, that got shut down, but which I appreciate. Thank you. But I do with you having said that, it was like, oh my gosh, I see that makes sense to me, because when I do a lot of reading of business stuff, it fucks with my head.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm reading things like Dr. Suzanne Simard's book about like the ecology of forests, has nothing to do, like it's stuff I know nothing about. That's where all of a sudden different ideas pop in and they like land in my compost pile of like Erica world and become these whole new ideas that I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm saying it here publicly. I am going to read fewer business books and more of the stuff because that's where the ideas come from.
Oh, there's so much here. Both of you have just given us like enough for a series. It's like...
Is there anything else you would qualify or anything that really hasn't been said yet about the deep work that you've been doing, Franklin? Because you've been like at it for like this year has been like your year for deep work, basically.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing that I do want to mention, and that is that one of the things that I changed immediately after reading the book Deep Work was that I switched my coaching sessions from 1 hour to 90 minutes. And the thing that has happened in my coaching sessions is that they have become exponentially more effective and powerful.
Wow.
And it's just a matter of that, that the hour wasn't enough time for us to go where we needed to go. Yeah. So even in the coaching relationship, there's room for deep work. And it's not just me with my door closed. It's us with having enough time to go where we need to go. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the other things that I wanted to mention, is that this isn't limited to soul activities. Deep work is something that we can do in our relationships and in organizations and other things. But we really need to just understand, what it is and how to facilitate it. Now, there were two things that you came up with, Audrey, that I really wanted to touch on. And one of them is that one of the essential components of deep work is deep rest, right?
Yeah.
And your time in the woods gave you the perspective that you could see what was possible when you cut yourself off from all the other stimuli. And,
and I couldn't I had no, right? I couldn't access it. There was literally no access. So I couldn't keep, I was cut off.
Well, in doing that, you realized a whole completely different set of possibilities for yourself than you would have ever been able to figure out had you been still connected to the virtual world, et cetera. So that deep rest was something that really stood out for me. It's like the deep rest that you allowed yourself to have for those 2 weeks shifted everything for you. And now as you come back, you can be really selective about what you're letting in. And you can be, again, you've seen that, okay, this actually could be an adjustment that I can make now, where I'm actually up earlier and doing more of the creative things that I'm able to do at the earlier point in the day. So it's like that deep rest, deep work relationship, I think, is really important to highlight.
Yeah.
The other thing
Yeah.
that came out of what you were talking about that was really, it really struck me, was the idea of, I think what you just described was a true sabbatical.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a couple of conversations with my good friend Teresa Funk about this in the last few months. She just finished up a year sabbatical. She's an author,
Oh,
and
Yeah.
she just found herself not able to stay in that realm for a certain period of time, and so she just allowed herself to have a whole year of not doing it. And one of the things that was really interesting about that is that in that time, there was a period where it was very uncomfortable. And once that period was passed by, all of a sudden, new possibilities started to emerge that otherwise probably would have never been possible or seen. And I think that that's another thing that we need to look at, is that maybe one of the things that we have to look at our own nature is
Mhm.
that there are times when we actually do need to have that extended period of abnormally restful behavior,
Mhm.
where we are taking the time away from things and getting into nature again and finding natural rhythms, actually, instead of overriding
Yeah.
them. I find that fascinating. And I think that what's happened then is that does allow your work now to go to a much deeper level without as much effort, because you've given you've given yourself the space to go away from that and then to come back to it. So
yeah.
those were a couple of thoughts that came up.
And something that you were just saying, Franklin, that I just want to underline is the idea of deep work in relationships,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to take other people who are around us for granted and to forget to really invest in those and invest in those relationships without this bloody thing, which I'm holding up my cell phone, following us around everywhere. And, being able to just invest in that as well, because that's another form of almost mini sabbaticals if you're with the right people. And if you're with somebody who does not give you a mini sabbatical feeling, like maybe it's time to get rid of them. And that's sort of the second piece of that was sort of also the discernment. I say things, I tend to be fairly extreme in my conversational style, and it's like, I'm going to get rid of all of this. But it's less about don't read anything that's business related, but be discerning about
Yes.
what
Yeah.
you allow into your space, into your inbox, into your ears, into, things that you borrow from the library. And,
Yeah.
be discerning about who is in your orbit, because they will either drain you or they will light you up. And you want to be with Franklin and Audrey because they like it's fucking fireworks in my
We
brain.
have fun.
So yeah, and that's
Well,
like the other big piece. And then the last one was just all of this, the conversations that we've had about Audrey's latest, adventures and closing everything down, and what you were saying, Franklin, with your friend who took a year-long sabbatical.
yeah.
Amazing. Building in those times for that, prioritizing those. And since we're close to 2023 starting, like taking a look at your calendar now before it gets filled up with
Mhm.
all of the stuff, and carve out the time for you.
Yeah. Erica, there was one thing I wanted to mention that you thankfully you brought it up again. So, and that was the whole thing about reading. Now, one of the things that I was able to justify most of my consumption habits on was that I was reading and learning about business.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I can probably count on one hand the things that I learned from all of that reading and all of those courses that I took. I can probably count 5 things that I learned that I'm
Mm-hmm.
using today and that have actually made any difference at all. So one of the things that I keep coming back to for myself is that I can, for so long, like for 30 plus, maybe almost 40 years, I gave myself a steady diet of professional books to read and professional learning to do.
Right.
And what's really been funny is like, I think it was last year or the year before last, I bought myself an Audible subscription, and I made the commitment that I would only read fiction books on my Audible.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do any nonfiction. I wouldn't do any business books. And I have to tell you that probably has fed my creativity and my
Mm-hmm.
inspiration and my just enrichment of life more than any of the business learning that I've ever done. And that was a really important realization for me, because I had this kind of nagging ongoing belief that the more that I learned, the better I would be. And that just wasn't true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to like make a circle for folks who are listening, or just make a big like FYI for people who are listening. What we're talking about is subversive. So we're talking about things like that sound like, easeful and lovely and all that sort of stuff. And I just want to remind people over and over and again, and I'm saying this for myself also, is that these actions that we're talking about taking in business are subversive. These are not the things that you are going to hear is the quote unquote right way.
Mm-hmm.
So
you'll have people talking you out of it.
Yes, you will have people talking you out of it. If you spend too much time, like we were just talking about, on social media, you will start convincing yourself that you're not on the path that's correct, right? So it takes a certain amount of protection. It takes a certain amount of sort of, it's that nurturing the seedling that you have that is really required here, because the majority, the status quo, whatever you want to call it, is going to want to convince you that what you're doing is incorrect and you're going to tank your business, and what is wrong with you anyway. Mm-hmm. So like, I think that like these concepts that we're talking about seem very kind of like duh, right? It's the stuff we're talking about. It's like makes complete sense. It's very common sense when you take into consideration like so many things. I'm just gesturing like around, but in reality, it's going to feel challenging to actually implement and stick to, and it will take that whole rebalancing, right? You're gonna tip over onto your other foot, and you're gonna have to try standing on that one foot again, and then you're gonna read something and it's gonna take you out sideways, and you're gonna come back, right? Just like Erica was talking about that zigzag. And I think that's just important to highlight, because you may listen to this podcast over and over again, right? Like if these are concepts that you want to become your reality, consume those concepts, right? Who's doing it? Who's doing things that you think are great, but like not that many people are doing? Like pay attention to the outliers and feed your brain with the outliers, because that's what you're going to need in order to like be able to stick to this in the long term.
Yeah, I love that. I
think we ought to have Erica finish us off today by talking about how to punch the leave button.
So okay, I'll get there, but 3 things. First is like, I love what you were just saying, Audrey, because so much of this is about learning how to trust yourself and building relationships with people who will help you to trust yourself and remind you to trust yourself, and who will support you when you are doing something that goes against the grain. The second piece is like ties into that is the whole idea of resilience. And there is a horrible song, I don't even know who sang it or when it came out, that I will sing to myself sometimes when I feel like I survived something that was hard. And it's that whole, I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Up again.
Chumbawamba.
Chumbawamba.
That was Chumbawamba Tub Thumping. Tub
Yeah.
Thumping.
I have no idea who they are, but like that song will like play on a loop in my head when I'm like, like I did it my way and you can bite me. And since
That was not Frank Sinatra, by the way. That was not how that song went.
No.
Yeah, exactly. No, that was Gina. Gina is my alter ego, and I highly recommend that every business owner have an alter ego who is a much bigger badass than they are to protect you from the things that don't work. So what Franklin was saying with leave, hitting the leave button, if you are in a call with somebody who is bullying, who is belittling, who is making you question your own intelligence and your inner wisdom and what you are doing with your damn life and your damn business, and if they do not listen to you and stop the bullshit, you can just move your mouse over the Zoom room and there's a lovely little bright red leave button. Hit it. You have my full permission and I endorse this message.
Well, my friends, this has been just absolutely wonderful. It's so good to be with you again.
Oh, Franklin, thank you for gathering us. This was, I feel like I feel like I took a journey and I'm a better person for it.
Yeah, me too.
Always amazing where we go. I love it.
Well, this is going to be our Thanksgiving episode. So this one's going to be released on Thanksgiving Day coming up in a couple of weeks.
I love that. I love that.
Lovely. And I am so grateful for you on that note.
Yes, same here. I was thinking the same thing. These two friendships have become priceless and important and pearls of great price to me. So thank you both.
Thank you, Franklin.
Thank you.
Let's get together again soon.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thanks for listening to Your Own Best Company. If you enjoyed the show, would you do me a favor and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast host? If you really love it, leave me a review or share it with your circles. If you feel like your career is reaching a dead end, or you're feeling a deep sense of dissatisfaction in your work right now, I help people discover their gifts and then find or create new opportunities that are the best fit for their talent, experience, and lifestyle. Email me at coaching@franklintaggart.com for more information. I also help people start, finish, and launch creative projects, and I offer an ongoing marketing mastermind for solopreneurs and freelancers. More information on these programs and services can be found at franklintaggart.com. Thanks again for spending this time with me.